After Series 3's less than amazing impression on me, I'm happy to say that Series 4 is a lot better in my own personal humble opinion. With the exception of 1 or 2 episodes, I'd say I enjoyed Series 4 more consistently throughout, and the music, characters, sets, and writing being much stronger. This was the series that introduced the narrow gauge engines, and episodes dedicated to them take up about the first half of Series 4, while the latter half is more dedicated to the standard gauge adventures. The narrow gauge adventures are all awesome, and I think the weaker episodes lie in the standard gauge ones personally. Which episodes do I like more than others? Well, my friends, time to find out. Let's begin the ranking. My least favourite episode of Series 4 is still miles ahead of my least favourite episode of Series 3. It is my least favourite episode for a reason though, and that's because it kind of feels like 2 stories mashed into one. You've got the whole thing of Toby thinking he's the special attraction but getting it turned away, but then you've also got Percy's incident with Bulstrode, the nasty badge. They have almost nothing to do with each other, which is a shame because I actually really liked the Bulstrode segment, and I think it should have been the main focus. We've had villainous engines, trucks, and road vehicles, and now we can add a sea vessel to that mix. The fact that he's so horrible that even the trucks dislike him is really saying something. The titular special attraction bits with Toby are just kind of tacked on at the beginning and the end. Remember back in Series 2 when they mentioned that Daisy dealt with a bull all by herself the other day? Well, this is the episode they were referencing. The scene when Daisy tries to scare it away is pretty funny, especially the noises that Angelis makes.
Ooh, tooted Daisy. Ooh, ooh, said Daisy again.
The music during the encounter also reminds me of the stuff you'd hear in Benidorm. Anyone else remember that show?
Yes, said Daisy unhappily. You know he's harmless, and I know he's harmless, but does he know? Look at his horns. If I bumped into him...
Also, since Daisy didn't actually scare it herself, does that mean that Ringo was lying? It's nice to have the sad story of Henry referenced, and it even feels like a nice little follow-up. Back then, Henry was the one that wouldn't quit the tunnel, but now he has to deal with something else that won't come out. The scene where he goes in and gets pushed right back out by the elephant was pretty funny, as well as him getting splashed by all the water. Because the sad story of Henry is mentioned so much, I do kind of wish this episode had been in an earlier season though, just so it would be fresher in people's minds. This is the final episode of Series 4, and honestly it's such a weird choice to end a series on. It's about a postman named Tom Tipper, who does a pretty great job, but has a bad day when his trusty van gets replaced by a bike, as a cost-cutting measure. It gets even worse when Percy's mail truck destroys his bike by accident, and you just have to feel bad for the poor guy. Having an episode revolve around a human character makes for an interesting change, but I'm glad they use sparingly, since it is the engines we're here for after all. This episode's pretty funny. I love Thomas and Toby's reaction to Stepney actually wanting to take the trucks out, and the whole incident revolving around Stepney accidentally going off with a cricket ball is super unbelievable but amusing. I like how you can see Bulgy in the background there. It's a bit like Bertie's chase but with Caroline and Stepney instead of Bertie and Edward. This picks up immediately after Down the Mine, which was 3 series ago. The flashback to Series 1 doesn't look too out of place, but when they cut back to the Series 4 footage it's definitely noticeable. The bigger engines all fret over who can pull the train, and it seems as though Henry could be in the running until he gets splattered with paint in this hilarious scene. Thomas and Gordon getting redemption for their accident is nice to see, although they didn't really do anything to earn it, did they? I don't really care about any of the stuff involving the Queen to be honest, but the ending narration is really heartwarming. It really feels like a celebration.
No engines ever felt prouder than those on the Fat Controller's Railway.
I like this episode mainly just because it's nice to see everyone. Having all the engines just going around doing things scratches that nice little fan itch. There's some cool pairings like Thomas and Oliver, and the part where he goes straight down the hill and through the crash is pretty funny. It's still got some of those silly sound effects, like that one crash in Series 3 that I didn't like, but it's not as ridiculous, so it's fine. In my opinion, this episode should have been the finale, a celebration of the main engines all gathered in one place for the fans to see. It's been a while since we've had a nasty diesel, so here we are. The diesel is unnamed in the episode, but it's known as Class 40, and he proves to be a right piece of work. He's a proper git, talking about how horrible the place is, and how all the engines should just be scrapped so diesels can take over. Funnily enough though, all of his points about how the workmen having to spend hours fussing over the engines to get them ready is probably true, and knowing real world history, this is pretty ironic since diesels did in fact take over. One problem I have with this is that it wasn't really the engines that taught him a lesson deliberately, it was the wind that blew the bowler hat into the diesel's air intake and caused him to break down. If that hadn't happened, then what would they have done? I guess the message was that diesels aren't infallible and can break down just as easily as steam engines.
Disgusting!
I said earlier that Thomas and the Special Letter would have been a better finale than Mind That Bike, but I also think that this might have been a nice finale too. If you take Stepney's 3 episodes as a 3-part finale, I think it fits. Saving an engine from scrap to give him a new home, having Thomas make a great new friend, and then proving to diesels that steam engines are still worthwhile, would have been a great way to cap off the series in my opinion. But what do I know, I'm not a writer. I really don't understand the beginning of this episode. Everyone's teasing Sir Handel over his steamroller wheels, and then when he tries biting back, they come up with a plan of making him see sense? I mean, I know it's just set up for the main event, but I find it a bit weird because they were the ones who started teasing him in the first place. What lesson is he supposed to learn? Is it because he actually thought they were jealous of his wheels and needed to know that it wasn't the case? I don't know. Anyway, I just love how awful George is. He just absolutely hates railways, and even makes a little repetitive song about it just to prove his point. Bless his cotton socks. The little rivalry between them is really fun to watch, and I used to love recreating their little road squeeze with my Urtles as a kid. Though the episode ends with Sir Handel being embarrassed by a couple of kids, I think it would have been much funnier if it ended with him thinking he'd made George go away, and the other engines feeling like their plan backfired. Give a little victory to Sir Handel. This feels like a Series 1 episode with a newcomer to the line causing a fuss and getting punished for it. We rarely get to see the narrow gauge engines sets at night, so this episode gave us a really nice glimpse of that. It's here where Scarlowe first meets his younger colleagues, and straight away Sir Handel goes about complaining. It's a wonder Peter Sam even puts up with him, but I guess he's used to it. Scarlowe even picks up on that and feels sorry for the poor bugger. The fact that Gordon of all people was taken aback by just how pompous Sir Handel is just says it all really. Brilliant. Stepney is having a good time on his new railway, but the line isn't very long and he wishes it was longer because it's stifling his desire to have a good run. Luckily, the Fat Controller agrees to have him on the railway for a bit. And I like this because it's quite realistic, since while Stepney is grateful for his rescue, he's not automatically going to be happy all the time and still wants more. It's really human. Engine? Thomas's dislike towards Stepney because he's jealous is fun. He's got a lot to learn. There is something hilarious about the fact that he gets pulled out of his jealousy by Stepney bringing up his ego. Not sure if there's meant to be a lesson learned there or what. Peter Sam is like the polar opposite of Sir Handel. While the blue guy absolutely refuses to work, the green one bloody loves it. And loves it so much that he gets excitable and he winds up causing issues. Then there's that nightmarish sight of Henry wearing Gordon's face that just looks wrong. So wrong. I kind of had to put this and Grandpuff next to each other because they're technically two halves of the same story. But in the spirit of ranking, I do prefer Grandpuff over this one. I really like the idea of there being a hardcore group of enthusiasts who just really want to find Duke. And the montage of them travelling all across the railway to find him is great. I like to think that they found loads of cool relics of the old railway while searching. The scene when the guy falls on Duke and the engine immediately assumes he's a vandal is lovely because I don't think he even realises how much time has passed. He just went to sleep and then woke up. The ending with everyone reunited is so heartwarming. This is the first episode of Series 4, and our introduction to the narrow gauge engines, which is probably what Series 4 is most well known for. The episode is framed as a story being told by Thomas, which was probably just put in there to immediately establish the present day cast, so kids knew this was the right show. It's a great introduction to the narrow gauge railway, with Duke, Peter Sam and Sir Handel, although back then they were Stewart and Falcon. Imagine seeing this as a kid for the first time. It must have been absolutely mind-blowing getting a glimpse at a completely separate railway, with none of the usual engines there. It's a really pleasant episode that establishes the trio. They're like a little old family that would only grow bigger when the other engines would be introduced. The story of Smudger is a really dark cautionary tale of what can happen to engines who misbehave on the railway. We never actually find out what happened to him afterwards. Was he scrapped? Did they leave him there and he got buried at the mountain? Who knows? The ending where you find out that the railway fell on hard times is just really somber, and the montage, accompanied by the sad music, really sells it. Duke just being left in the shed like that is really cold, especially considering that the workmen knew these engines are sentient. The way time is shown passing by the mountain, gradually burying the shed, just hits you right in the heart. Excellent environmental work there. A brilliant start to Series 4. If you're wondering why this episode isn't higher, it's because that not that much really happens in the episode itself. It's more like a montage through time on the old railway, with some stops along the way. The narrow gauge episodes are all set in present day by now, and here's the one that introduces Scarlowe and Rheneas, although only Scarlowe really gets to do anything. This is the first time we see a narrow gauge engine interacting with the bigger ones, and as a kid I genuinely had no idea that there was such a size difference until I saw them together like this. Sir Handel's mishap on the Lime Sheep is actually pretty funny, and Scarlowe taking over despite not being fully ready is some great stuff. The fact that he was able to finish his journey in such a state is so impressive. Well done, that man. This episode is weird. It's like a redo of Escape, but it makes a bit less sense. Once again, the railways need another engine, and Rusty gets the bright idea of getting one from where Douglas found Oliver. Rusty is an awesome character, and I really like seeing him do stuff. I really like the little montage of him finishing his work and travelling to the yard. The ominous way the Diesels speak to Rusty is spooky. They're like some weird otherworldly guardian of the yards or something. Especially this line right here.
Where is he going? They hissed.
The sight of Stepney standing amongst all the scrapped engines is a really grim sight, but at least his driver is keeping him company. The music and scenery as they travel down the line is wonderful, very cinematic. The biggest issue is the fact that there just happens to be a narrow gauge line that goes all the way to the other railway, which I'm pretty sure is on the mainland. I get this is all fictional and stuff, but come on. You just have to suspend your disbelief just a bit further here, but I think it's a good episode. I love the scenery in this episode. The whole narrow gauge area of the island looks amazing, and I could probably say this for every episode set here, but I thought I'd say it here. The castle next to the river looks fantastic, as well as the forest road. Just lovely. Stuart spends the episode trying to poke fun at Duke for being old, and joking that he needs help. Duke proves that he may be old, but he's still more than capable of pushing as well as any other engine. Scarlowy returns to the railway after being mended, and soon gets to know everyone there. This is the episode that introduces my favourite character, Duncan. He's rude and really rough while riding, which leads him to getting stuck or derailing. We hear about how much of a difference Rusty has made on the line since his introduction, and it's great to have some background storytelling going on. I feel like it's not that often we actually know what the impact the engine's work has. Duncan's bluntness is hilarious. He doesn't care who he says or what he offends. Wait, it's up to Scarlet to save the day, and get Duncan out of there, once again proving why he's so useful. This episode is a nice callback to Thomas Goes Fishing, and also feels like a sequel to The Flying Kipper. Like I said, the narrow gauge sets of the series are lovely, but the standard gauge one gets some really good showings here. The harbour set at night looks spectacular, with all the steam, lights, and boxes laying around, harkening back to that scenery that I loved in Series 1. There's some fantastic camera work in this episode, with the long shot of Henry departing with a flying kipper being a standout. I really like the way Duck and Henry's themes are mixed in together too. The crash is also pretty good. Something I really appreciate about this episode is its place in the series. It's following on from the events of Oliver Owns Up from back in Series 3, as Oliver finally returns back to the railway after being mended. I've whinged in the past about follow-up episodes either happening too quickly or happening in a weird order. For example, I think Henry got out of his tunnel way too quickly after the events of the sad story of Henry. And Paint Pots and Queens being 3 series after Down the Mine, yet taking place right after it just feels weird. This episode though, it feels just right. While the other events of this series have been happening, Oliver's been in the works, and now it's time for his proper return. They could have very easily put this right after Oliver Owns Up to make a little trilogy, but they didn't, and I'm grateful for this. Yeah, he was in Thomas in the Special Letter, but we've already established that these episodes are rarely in a consistent timeline of events, so don't worry about it, that happened after this. Anyway, the episode itself is good too. Seeing the trucks have a leader in Scruffy is interesting, because it makes me wonder what other sort of hierarchy and social interactions the trucks have with each other. Not gonna lie, I would love more episodes that explore that. It's the first time Toad speaks, and I really like the accent Michael Angelis gives him.
This disrespect for engines, where's it going to end?
I used to think that Toad's plan was just to deliberately pull Scruffy apart to teach the trucks a lesson, but I found out later that it was just pulling the trucks 2 by 2 and then taking Scruffy last. Either way, Oliver plows on, and despite the truck's best efforts at holding him back, he manages to push ahead. Unfortunately, since Scruffy was so rotten both figuratively and literally, he just splits apart from the strain, with some really pain-sounding narration from Angelis.
Well, Scruffy.
I'm coming apart!
As much as I like this episode, I can't help but find the placement of it a bit weird. Okay, so hear me out. Grandpuff introduces us to the old railway and the engines that live on it, and then at the end of the episode we see the railway closing and Duke going to sleep in his shed. Sleeping Beauty follows from that, and in the present day with Duke being rescued. Now, here in the third episode, we're going back to that period of time we saw in Grandpuff, when the railway was busy in the olden days. Is it just me, or would it have made more sense to have this episode come first, maybe? I mean, considering Grandpuff involves essentially seeing the end of the old railway, well, pretty much the entirety of Bulldog is set during the heyday, I personally think it would have made more narrative sense to have Grandpuff be the final episode of all the flashback episodes. If we're going by timeline order, then you have to see the first half of Grandpuff, then Bulldog, then the second half of Grandpuff, then Sleeping Beauty. Am I crazy? Anyway, it's a really good episode, with a potentially catastrophic accident being prevented by the heroic efforts of old Duke. I actually really like how quickly Falcon goes over the edge like that. No dramatic build-up, just whoosh. Duke proves that he's still capable of being a hero and saving another engine despite his old age.
I love Duke. He's a great character.
I can't wait to see more after this series. The episode that introduces Rusty, another favourite of mine. His first interaction with Harold is great. He's polite and pleasant enough, but you can tell he doesn't suffer interruptions. Gordon gets more time with Sir Handel, and convinces him to pretend to be ill to get out of work. Jeez, that guy just does not want to put in any effort, does he? The trucks absolutely despise Sir Handel, and are more than happy to smash into him. But I actually like the fact that they genuinely do not want to hit Peter Sam. I guess it humanises the trucks a bit more. The scene where they smash into him is pretty spectacular because not only do they hit him, but they also destroy a nearby structure that collapses right on top of him, ruining his funnel. The way he has to limp off at the end, sounding so defeated, is just sad.
Thank you, Rusty. He sighed and limped slowly home.
I really like the ending with Rusty and Harold meeting up again and exchanging pleasantries. I like to think that they have a little buddy thing going on. Seeing the Skarloey Railway in the winter is really nice and makes a welcome change. I feel really bad for Peter Sam. His funnel's been dodgy ever since the incident in trucks, and he's had to put up with it while he waits for a new one. The scenery throughout the episode is lovely. It's all gloomy and depressive, which is realistic because British weather being what it is, it's rarely often going to be as sunny and pleasant looking as the other episodes have portrayed. The sight of an engine without a funnel just looks really wrong. It's like he's bald. Duncan is up to his usual shenanigans, who apparently hasn't learned his lesson from last time, in Home at Last. He's still rocking and rolling and...
I don't need smelly diesels to tell me what to do.
Ouch. James's own prejudice against diesels is once again brought up, and he and Duncan bond over that mutual distrust. That's nice character building, I guess? Rusty has had enough of all the abuse he gets off Duncan, and outright refuses to go help him. But Skarloey sternly reminds him that he has a duty to help the passengers who are currently stranded, which soon motivates Rusty to get to the scene. I like this because it shows that even the really helpful and reliable engines aren't 100% infallible, and also have their own misgivings and problems. After Duncan is saved, he finally warms up to Rusty and thanks him, wishing that all diesels were like him. I mean, statistically speaking, there's more nice diesels than horrible ones by now, so yeah. This is a really fun Skarloey episode. It's lovely how much he reminisces about the good old days with Rheneas, and his genuine shock about the news of his friend coming back is really cute. Duncan pulling up and wanting to be polished and just missing Nancy was pretty funny, and it really sets him off. It's a wonder they even keep him around because he just does nothing but cause issues to the railway, with little regard for his passengers. Once again, it's up to Skarloey to save the day. He's really carrying the line on his cab, isn't he? This episode is a great showing of Rheneas, who up until now we've barely seen. We've had glimpses of him in flashbacks, and have heard Skarloey talking about his friend, but we've never had an actual role for him until now. It's a flashback of how Rheneas saved the railway when it fell on hard times, framed as a story by Skarloey. The story is one we've more or less already seen, with an engine pushing on through its struggles to get its passengers home, so it's nothing new in that regard, but hey, if it's good, it's good. The fact that Rheneas offered to take on Skarloey's duties despite having his own problems is a sign of what a good friend and a hard worker he was. Remember back in my Series 2 ranking when I said that Edward's exploit was a great story but hampered by the production since it didn't really sell the environmental struggle with Edward's journey? Well, thanks to the production team's efforts by now, they've got much better with scenery and special effects. So, Rheneas' tough journey is not only conveyed as such through narration, but through the visuals too. We can actually see the mist and rain fogging up the background, really adding to the atmosphere. Like I said back then, I consider both story and visuals to be equally important for a television viewing experience, and thankfully this episode delivers wonderfully. Series 4 was a masterful step up in terms of set design and visuals, especially on the narrow gauge side of things, and I think they should have waited until now or Series 5 to do Edward's exploit. Maybe Series 5, because Four Little Engines, Gallant Old Engine, and Edward's exploit are all similar stories, and having 3 in one series might be a bit crowded. The ending when Rheneas finally comes home is really heartwarming, and it's nice for Skarloey to have his best friend back. So there's the ranking for Series 4. Not gonna lie, as I got closer to the top it grew more and more difficult to rank these, and if I were to revisit this sometime in the future, then some of the placements may as well be different, because there's so many great episodes here. I do wish the series was spaced out a bit different, because having the first 14 episodes all be narrow gauge, and then the last 12 be standard gauge, kinda feels like a bit of whiplash when the change happens, and I think I would have preferred to have them more evenly sprinkled in. Still though, it's a great series. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my recent videos on one-off Thomas characters, and a list of which real-life Thomas & Friends basis vehicles still survive today. It's a really informative video, I think. The Series 5 ranking will be out soon, and will most likely be my final Thomas series ranking until I actually motivate myself to watch Series 6 onwards. Thank you for watching and have a great day.